Thanks, everyone, for joining us for Blueprints for Innovation, Intellectual Property in the Bluegrass State. I'm Caroline Stivers, Director of the Kentucky Intellectual Property Alliance, a program of Kentucky Science and Technology Corporation. So I'm thrilled to welcome you all here today on behalf of KIPA, our partners from the Council for Innovation Promotion, or C4IP, and UK Innovate, and other supporters, and all of the incredible innovation ecosystem that's growing right here in the Commonwealth. So today's event is really about celebrating ideas, protecting the ingenuity, and empowering people behind Kentucky's next big breakthroughs. Whether you're an inventor, an entrepreneur, an attorney, or an advocate, you all are all a vital part of that conversation. So we have a great lineup of speakers and are excited for you all to be here today and share those insights from the wealth of knowledge that we have here in the room with us. And I will now hand it over to Ian McClure, Vice President for Innovation of UK Healthcare and Associate VP for Research, Innovation, and Economic Impact of UK Research, for an introduction from the University of Kentucky. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Caroline. I want to corroborate the thank you to the Council for Innovation Promotion, C4IP, Peter, Frank, Andre. Thanks for being here, being a part of this important discussion that we're going to have today. I want to also thank Caroline and KIPA also for your stewardship of intellectual property policy thinking, education, brainstorming here for the state of Kentucky. Since we formed KIPA, it's truly been instrumental to help us think about IP as an important aspect of Kentucky. I'm going to just say a couple of level-setting words, and then I'm going to introduce the leader of our research enterprise here at UK. As Caroline said, I'm a Vice President of Innovation for UK Healthcare. I oversee what we call UK Innovates. Some of our team members are here, sprinkled in the crowds. They do amazing work to manage the intellectual property here for the university. I'm excited about the conversation that we're going to have today. I've been fascinated with intellectual property since I began my career. And that started with a startup that I started back in 2010, focused on intellectual property. We were able to raise $20 million. We created 35 jobs. That startup would not have existed, those jobs would not have existed, were it not for intellectual property laws. And I'm going to pose this because we're going to reflect on this. It sort of took some social media by storm just over a week ago. Jack Dorsey, former co-founder of Twitter, former CEO of Twitter, now X, mused publicly about delete all IP law. Now, it was amusing, but it was responded to by Elon Musk, who said, I agree. Again, amusing, and I only put this out there, not for political banter, but just to say that we're going to reflect on that. What if IP law did not exist? What impact would that have on our economy here in Kentucky? I can tell you that here at UK, it would have a pretty significant one, and we'll talk about that today. We manage over 600 intellectual property assets globally for the university. We have spun out over 100 startup companies here at UK since 2008. And I can tell you that those startups have created jobs, generated revenues, had impact here locally on the economy. And I can also tell you that none of that would have happened if it not were for intellectual property that protected the investments that happened because of those in those startups and the technology that they had developed. So we're going to muse too. We're going to muse on that. We're going to actually talk about the impact. We've got some amazing speakers that are going to come and be a part of a conversation later following a really special fireside chat that we have between former USPTO Director Andrzej Janku and Congressman Thomas Massey. This is going to be a special, special conversation that I'm excited about. So with some of that just level setting, and I get my time on the microphone later, I'm going to introduce our Vice President for Research, Dr. Ilham Masoudi, who is the fearless leader of our research enterprise that produces all of those 600 plus patent assets here.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for making time to be with us today. It is absolutely my pleasure to welcome you to the University of Kentucky. This will come at no surprise, but research is of critical importance to our university and, more importantly, to the Commonwealth. Fundamental discoveries are happening every day in our laboratories. And these labs are led by really talented researchers who are training the next generation of innovators who are going to completely transform our world. Our discoveries are then translated into new therapies, into treatments for patients across UK healthcare. They also become new products that change the way we live and work. And these discoveries also inform policies and improve the lives of Kentuckians and beyond. The quality of our researchers' ideas are recognized by our amazing research portfolio. So in the last fiscal year, UK received almost $500 million of research awards. And that included almost 2,000 new projects that were awarded to 830 principal investigators from 633 sponsors. So I'm gonna let that sink for a minute. $500 million, 2,000 new projects, almost 1,000 principal investigators, and over 600 different sponsors. So our research is valued and recognized. Our industry partners are absolutely central to the areas of research at UK. They are often the launch pad for our new ideas. Our push from being discovered, being a dream, to actually reaching the finish line and reaching the people that the products need to reach. And so for us, the protection of those innovations that our researchers are making every day is absolutely vital. Whether that's through licensing, options, patents, the university facilitates the translation of ideas into products or treatments or interventions that can change lives. So UK's effort in research and development have also had an incredible direct effect from an economic standpoint on our state. Those $500 million that UK spent in research and development in fiscal year 24, so the last fiscal year, have generated almost $1 billion in economic activity across Kentucky. So I want to repeat that again. So for every dollar of research dollars that we receive, we create $2 of economic development in our state. That cannot be underestimated. Because of that, we create over 4,700 jobs in the state, and over half of those jobs are directly supported by research initiatives. And this is our North Star. This is the mission we believe in, because we are the university of, for, and with Kentucky. So what does that mean, right? This is a sentence that we've all heard. It means that it is our absolute mission to advance Kentucky for all of its citizens. We do that with partnering with industries across our state, whether that could be a small incubator or it could be a really large, well-established company. We work together to look for solutions, improve manufacturing processes to use less power, or creating a stronger cement using a coal waste byproduct, like to reduce biofilms and antibiotic resistance. We do it all. And our goal is always very simple in all of these endeavors: to make life better for the Commonwealth and beyond. And we also do that by mentoring and preparing the next generation of researchers. We're preparing our students to enter the workforce, not only here in Kentucky, but also the global workforce. We're working together to strengthen that pipeline, to train our students and the next generation to be creative and resilient thinkers who are equipped with those critical thinking skills, but also the ability to adapt and pivot when there's emerging technologies or when there's crises. So with that, I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. I look forward to the discussion that's going to ensue and the fireside chat. And for now, I'd like to turn the stage over to Frank. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Masoudi, and thank you, Ian. Thank you, Caroline, for all the partnership and the hard work that's gone into this event. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm delighted to see so many people with us today. It's also a pleasure to get outside of DC, as I can see by so many of you in the room. I should have left the tie at home. It's a beautiful day outside, and too bad we're inside talking about matters that really don't mean very much, right? This is super important stuff, as Ian mentioned. So for those of you who don't know, I work with the Council for Innovation Promotion. Our mission is to try to educate policymakers and advocate for a strong IP system to support our innovation ecosystem. Now, some folks might not quite understand where the correlation is between intellectual property and innovation, but it plays a central role. The genius of our founders was that they understood that if we could move beyond an agrarian society and grow our economy, we could compete with legacy economies and countries that we really wouldn't otherwise have a chance to compete with. And of course, that genius has been borne out. We're the leading economy in the world, the most innovative country in the world, and of course, we have the most creative output. None of that is by accident. So when C4IP was formed, the leadership was two former USPTO directors, Andre Iancu, who's with us today, and David Kapos, two former retired federal judges. And the real mission was to make sure that we got folks familiar with the idea of intellectual property supporting innovation. So one of the things we've seen over the last few decades is a consistent attack on our IP system. There are a lot of reasons for this. Some are economic, companies that just don't necessarily rely on IP so much for their business, some who have a different view about property rights, some from countries that want to overtake our leadership as the world's most innovative and also creative country in the world and the strongest economy. But fundamentally, what we need to have is a better understanding amongst our policymakers and leadership in Congress and the administration to preserve the important policies that have made our economy so strong and created so many domestic jobs. That's one of the reasons I'm so excited that we're joined today by one of the few folks in Congress who really gets it, who really understands why intellectual property is so central to our innovation ecosystem and economy. These issues should not be partisan. And one of the things that I really want to drive home today is that as a bipartisan organization, we want to support policymakers who understand these issues, not because they're on the right or the left, but because they're good for our country. That's the kind of leader that Congressman Massey is. He's an independent voice for Kentucky. He's somebody who has broad experience in his own personal career in these issues, and he brings that wisdom and experience to Congress. It's interesting, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee often says, when I want to learn more about intellectual property, I know who to talk to. I talk to Thomas Massey, because the congressman really understands these issues. It's tremendously important that more people in Congress understand them. That is the mission of C4IP. We're also trying to educate other audiences, academics, the media, in some cases, the general public, because what's taken root is a sense that somehow intellectual property is an entitlement, when in fact, it's an incentive. So from our point of view, we want to return to some of the foundational beliefs that the founding fathers put into our Constitution about why people should have the right to their inventions, they should be able to bring things to market, and they should be able to create jobs. And I know we're going to hear a lot more about that today. One of the things I really want to say is how pleased I am that the University of Kentucky and the entire region has devoted a great deal of attention to this. UK Innovate, doing tremendous work. Kentucky Intellectual Property Association, great organization. We look to partner with folks outside of Washington because these issues are local. They're just not about inside the Beltway policy discussions. Lastly, I'll leave with you that just in the last several years, we've seen a very disturbing trend, not only here in the United States, but abroad. Proposals that would weaken the IP system globally and really abandon decades of domestic leadership, US leadership on these issues. When you're talking about threatening bringing university research to market, when you're talking about restricting the rights of different industry sectors to defend and assert their IP rights, when you're talking about ways that we would undermine the rights of individual inventors, these are all very serious policy considerations that we'll be hearing more about today. So I want each of you to enjoy the next hour or so, where we're going to hear some really fascinating discussion and some great speakers. It's really my privilege and honor to be able to introduce two leaders on IP policy, folks who can really share their real-world perspective with you. I mentioned Congressman Massey's leadership, but what I didn't mention is, as I think so many of you probably already know, what an impressive background he has. MIT, inventor, bringing an amazing new technology to market and attracting millions and millions of dollars of venture capital and creating over 70 jobs in the process. The ability to actually translate issues that are complex and legal and often things that seem esoteric to the common citizen into real world terms. How intellectual property and innovation help improve quality of life for people and his constituents, how they drive domestic jobs, how they create opportunity in underserved communities. There's so many things that IP can do. We also are joined by my boss and one of the founders of the Council for Innovation Promotion, Andre Iancu, former USPTO director. Andre also has a background in innovation. He was an engineer at Hughes Aircraft in Los Angeles, became a patent attorney, and realized that he could bring his knowledge and his passion for these issues to the administration to make a real difference. Andre is recognized as one of the best PTO directors in recent history, and under his leadership, there was a real resurgence of appreciation and understanding for the important role intellectual property plays in driving innovation. So with that, I'd like to invite Congressman Massey and Director Iancu to the stage for a fireside chat that I know we're all going to enjoy. And I want to thank all of you for being here today. And again, thank you, Ian and Caroline, for the partnership.
It's warm today. I'm glad there's no fire in front of us.
Yeah, well, I come from LA, and I'm also glad that there is no fire in front of us. Great to see you. Great, thank you first of all to Frank. Thank you for the super kind introduction. Thank you to the University of Kentucky. Ian, thank you for organizing this and inviting us. Just one quick word about Ian. All major universities have a technology transfer office, and I've seen and I know almost all the tech transfer office leaders and directors around the country. Ian McClure, who's your tech transfer office director, is as good as they come in this industry, and he was also a former head of the National Association of University Tech Transfer Offices. He was the president, I think that ended about a year ago. So great to be with you, Congressman. What an honor to be with you. You and I have been discussing IP for quite some time. It's great to do it in this format. In your home state. I think I first came to know you when I was second year associate in law. I had a case on haptics for a company called Immersion, and the other side said, well, your client's patents are not valid because somebody else invented first. And we're like, well, who did that? And they gave us these patents, and it had Massey. So they were all the Massey patents that I litigated for a while. And then I come to Washington, and there he is.
So he worked for my competitor many years ago, before I was in politics. And he came to my office, and his name was being floated as the patent director, and I wanted to meet this guy because supposedly he had really good views on patents, but then he had to tell me he worked for my competitor. But we're good friends.
Yes. Congressman, you are, as the introduction made clear, very knowledgeable and one of the leaders in Congress on IP and patents in particular. And it began with you actually being an inventor, an engineer, and a patent owner. So maybe you can start by telling folks a little bit about how your innovation journey.
Sure. I grew up in Eastern Kentucky. I tell J.D. Vance he's appropriated my culture, that I'm actually a hillbilly. I took things apart because I wanted to build things, and I didn't have a car to get to Radio Shack to buy the parts, so I took apart my mom's clocks and vacuum cleaners and things like that. Nothing was safe in our house, and I built robots with them, and inspired by the movies. There was no YouTube, or there were no kits to build robots at the time, and I went to international science fairs, from the Moorhead Regional Science Fair, and won an award there, and was inspired to go to MIT, and ended up there and studied engineering and started a company in my dormitory, in a laboratory there at MIT based on intellectual property. And Ian's story strikes home because, you know, I ended up raising $32 million of venture capital and hiring 70 people. And although we didn't go public, if we had gone public, I might not be speaking to you today. We didn't go public, but we did, I would say, get to second base, and the technology was useful, and it improved a lot of people's lives. It was a virtual reality technology that lets you feel three-dimensional objects. And so we wrote software that let you sculpt in the computer. So computers are really good for straight lines and things, but to make a sculpture is really hard with a mouse. So we invented the device that allowed you to do that. We sold to shoe companies, car companies, toy companies. But it couldn't have happened without patents. Because at MIT, there was a strong venture capital community. And they were looking for three things before they would give you money. They wanted to know that you had a market. If there is no market for what you're doing, they're not interested. And you had to prove that. They wanted to know that you had a strong team, that your astronauts weren't going to leave the space capsule before it launched, right? Or maybe murder each other in the space capsule, as an analogy to a startup. Maybe that's too accurate. And then three, they wanted to know about your technology. Did you have a competitive advantage that somebody else couldn't replicate? Did you have a head start? Did you have patents? And you would think when you think of venture capitalists, I know you've worked with a lot of them, you would think they are risk averse, or you would think they're risky. They invest in the riskiest companies, right? So I thought, oh, these are risky people. No, they want to eliminate all the risk they can. In fact, when I raised my first round of money, I was in this incubator in a little space right next to the university with like 3 other people, and the venture capitalists wanted key man insurance on me. And I didn't even have like health insurance, and they wanted life insurance on me. I didn't have car insurance. I mean, so they wanted me to go to the doctor and get checked out, and I refused to do it, so they sent a nurse to my office, and she was drawing my blood to get a blood test, and I looked at her and I said, my God, you really are blood-sucking venture capitalists. So that's my start.
So you alluded to this, but the question is, could it happen at all? Could the startup economy, could the innovation economy exist without patents? And especially from a university perspective. And I ask this because there's one of the common gut feeling reactions of many students on campuses, but most importantly, legislators who don't really know the issues. The common reaction is, people are going to invent anyway. Universities are going to do research anyway. We give them the grants, they're going to do the research. You like your garage, you're going to invent in your garage anyway because you're an engineer. And once the inventions are done, why don't you just give it to the public? Let the public just have access to it. And they say that patents are really just putting a barrier to that access to the innovation that's already happened. Is that how it really works?
So inventors are passionate, and I've heard this argument that, oh, you guys like what you do. You'll invent anyway. We don't need patents. This is just ingrained in you. And I would agree. Inventors are a special type. And I'm not talking just about engineers, biologists and people who are making discoveries. They want to find a new frontier. And many of us would, if we had to, we'd give blood plasma to support our inventing habit, right? We would donate blood just to do this. But the question is, who's going to invest in the idea? Nobody will invest in it. And the other thing is, do you really want your brightest people giving their blood plasma in order to do the thing they're good at? Probably not. you need to have a way that they can get remunerated for the blood, sweat, and tears that they spend. And the investment money isn't going to come if you can't get a clear title. So my analogy for patents is they're like deeds. Let's say you owned a piece of property. Would you put a building on it if you didn't have a deed to that property? Knowing that, let's say you built a house, somebody could walk into your kitchen and use your stove at any time. Would you build anything knowing they could come tear it down? No, you want to have a clear title, and that title is required for investment in it. The bank won't give you a loan to buy the property unless you have a title, and the venture capitalists are not going to invest in your idea unless you have a title or a deed to it, and that's what patents are.
And drugs are the most immediate example here, and they're also the hottest topic in Washington, because of drug prices and all of that. And drugs are also special category because it takes a lot of money to do the research and do all the clinical trials that the FDA requires and whatnot. It takes a decade to bring a drug to market. Most of them fail anyway. It takes over $2 billion on average. And then the other thing about drugs is that they're easily replicable. Once it's out, any high school student with in a chemistry lab can reverse engineer it and get the formula out. So expensive, difficult to bring to market, and once successful, it's easily replicable. Without patent, and then the concept in Washington is, well, geez, just take these patents away so we can have lower prices. But the problem is, I think, without patents on those drugs, you won't have the pharma companies bringing them to market in the first place. You can have a brilliant idea in the lab, but the $2 billion to bring it to market, who would do that?
Yeah, some people, in fact, I'm not picking on University of Louisville here, although that might be popular to do, because I have a son-in-law and a daughter who graduated from there. But there was a University of Louisville professor, I think he was a dean, talking to me about how these bad the patents were raising the price of drugs and things like that. And I said, I'll make a deal with you the next time you go. And he gave me examples of drugs that had been invented, maybe not developed, but the concept had been invented publicly, maybe through government funding or through university. And I said, I'll make you a deal. We'll see who lives longer. Every time you go to the hospital or the doctor for something, tell them you only want the drugs that aren't patented, that were never patented and never developed with patents. And let's see who lives longer. He didn't make me that deal, but no, I mean, it is a common thing, and there's some falsehoods about patents that is frustrating. I have to tell my colleagues in Congress that story is not true. Like, there's this idea that you could, when your patent expires, you could somehow sprinkle some magic dust on it and get it renewed. You can't renew a patent like that for another 20 years or 15 years. It doesn't work that way. You have to improve on it, right? So, like, one example is the EpiPen, right? They tried to blame patents for the reason the price of the EpiPen was expensive. Well, they invented a new tip on the EpiPen. That's the part that you couldn't replicate. You can go build EpiPens if you want. Now, the FDA may have something to say about it, and also the insurance companies may not put it on their covered list. But there's no patent that keeps you from building the EpiPen that was available a few years ago. That's the whole deal you do when you do a patent. You explain to the world how to rip you off. You give them a user manual, and if it doesn't enable them to rip you off at some point in the future, then it's not even a valid patent.
That's the quid pro quo that patents are. You tell the public how to do it, and in exchange for that, you get a limited time of protection. Another example is AZT. AZT was a failed cancer drug, and then a lot more research was done, and a lot more money to bring it to market anew to treat HIV, as you'll recall, and it was very successful. But you want to incentivize that follow-on research. You want to protect that follow-on investment, because otherwise, you're not gonna get people to do it, and you would miss out on these unbelievable improvements. Okay. So, because of this and some other reasons, as we know, there have been significant attempts and successful attempts actually to weaken the United States patent system in multiple ways. We don't have time today to go through all of them, but two of them I want to tee up for you and get your views on is, number one, injunctions have been weakened and effectively removed in most cases, and then there's a new proceeding to challenge the validity of patents at the PTAB. So, a lot of words there, so let's take it one by one, and let's first talk about injunctions. What are they, why are they important, and where are we in the legislation on this?
First, a disclaimer. I didn't set out to be the Congress's expert in IP, right? When I ran for office, I had no idea this would even be a topic that I would be involved in. I knew we would deal with taxes and healthcare and foreign policy. By the way, every congressman thinks they're an expert on taxes because they've paid taxes. Well, most of them have paid taxes. And then they've all been to the doctor, so they're all experts on healthcare. But none of them, like very few of them, have filed for a patent or started a company that required IP. So this is my disclaimer. In the land of the blind, the one I did.
You were not even on judiciary when I first got there.
That's right. Maybe I should give you credit. No, but no, I got. I'm not a lawyer, and so. But the problem is, all the lawyers on the Judiciary Committee know nothing about patents. So
the one inventor they have after of the 535 members, I think there's 2 or 3 of them. Like the one that really is he wasn't on the committee that watches this issue.
So I finally got on that committee, and by the way, it's because I say the gorillas are wrestling in Washington D.C. The inventors are the bananas, okay? And we're hoping that one gorilla may prevail over the other gorilla. But the gorillas are like big tech, and I'll say names. You may have to be more diplomatic. Google and Apple, they hate patents because they've got so much money. They want to build cell phones. They want to build cars. The problem is they didn't invent cell phones, and they didn't invent cars, like the underlying stuff that's inside them. And so they're wrestling with the other gorilla, which is not as big, which are the companies that actually make the chips that go inside that make those things work. And so eventually, one of the gorillas in D.C. on K Street, because K Street decides so much about who gets on which committee, unfortunately, I finally had a gorilla who thought I should also be on this committee. So that's one of the reasons that I got on there. Now, your 2 topics, injunctions. This one, I just came from my farm today, and I heard a chainsaw running in the back 40 acres, and I wondered if somebody was cutting one of my trees. Now, this is a good place to start with an analogy to patents and the current situation in the courts. If I went back in the woods and found my neighbor had crossed the barbed wire fence back there and was cutting down some nice white oak trees because they're bringing a lot of money for bourbon barrels these days, and I ran to the courthouse and I told the sheriff and I told the judge, there is somebody right now with a chainsaw and a bulldozer taking trees off my property. The equivalent answer of the courts right now with respect to patents, if you found somebody was stealing your idea, is, well, you know what, we've taken a look and we do think those are your trees, and they are stealing them. They belong to you and they're selling them. They're making money, and we're going to let them keep doing that. And later on, at some point, we'll decide what they should pay you for the enjoyment of and the profit of cutting your trees. That is wrong. That is not what the founders intended. In the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8, they say exclusive use. That Congress shall grant to the inventors and authors exclusive use, not we'll make you share it until we figure out what they maybe should pay you. So, and that's not the fault. Well, it kind of is the fault of Congress that that's the situation, but it's a result of a Supreme Court ruling. And Congress could fix this if we would pass a bill to say you can get an injunction. And I think you should be able to. This is just, like I said, we can understand this in Eastern Kentucky. They should be able to, with our trees, they should be able to understand this in the IP courts. And then what was the other thing you were
Well, on the injunction point,
Yeah.
to dwell on it for just an additional second, we did pass a law. Congress passed it, and the president signed it in December of 2020 to fix the injunction point on trademarks. Trademarks, there's multiple types of IP: patents, trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets, and some other smaller types. So we did it for, it's one sentence, we did it for trademarks. It's really easy theoretically to do it for patents as well. It's a question of political will, effectively, right?
And there's another place you can get an injunction. I think it's if somebody's importing a rip-off product, the International Trade ITC
Yes.
is that can intervene and give an injunction.
Yes, you can stop the import at the border, but some of the same guerrillas that are working to weaken the IP system also want to remove that. So there is an effort on Capitol Hill to weaken the border enforcement of IP.
You don't have to tell me. I found it in the fine print of a totally unrelated bill where they were trying to take out the ITC's ability to do injunctions. It was in like some committee report that was adjunct to the bill that was passing, and I was on the Rules Committee, and I made them strike the language in exchange for my vote.
Well, that's a fresh thing to read the bill before we pass it into law. I mean, it seems to have some advantages. Okay, so then the second major way that has weakened IP is this law that was passed in 2012, signed into law by President Obama, bipartisan law, to create a new body at the USPTO, the PTAB, that creates yet an additional avenue to kill patents, in addition to the courts, for example. Can you explain that a little bit and what the status is?
So the PTAB, patent trial, what is?
Patent Trial and Appeals Board.
Okay. I don't want to get too specific because I know you know all of these things and I know it at the top level, but the PTAB is like a death panel for patents. And somebody can say, we want to send your patent to the death panel for, to put in front of the firing squad and see if it survives. They don't even have to have something called standing, right? Like if you have to prove that you're harmed in order to go to a court and make something happen. That's the way our judicial system works. You don't have to do that with PTAB. PTAB is like a fake court where they pretend that they're litigating things, but they have totally different standards for, proof and things like that. And a lot of patents that have been issued by Andre himself, they have the imprimatur of Andre Iancu.
Those are all valid.
They go to PTAB and then they get invalidated. But wait, why did you grant those, Andre, if they're invalid? Well, and the irony is that the PTAB is also under the Patent Office. It's not like a second court or a second branch of government. It should be, like the third branch of government, the courts. So the problem is it gives you uncertainty. It's almost like you get your patent. It's got the imprimatur of the government. It's, the US dollar is worth something because the government stands behind it. And if the government doesn't stand behind the patent once they say it's valid, then the uncertainty now creeps in and the venture capitalists get nervous and they say, you know what, maybe we'll invest in another country where they don't have this PTAB and where they have more predictable outcomes. And I think the PTAB is a violation of our Constitution. There is, the Bill of Rights. There's 10 of those. I like the ones that people forget about. Like everybody knows First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment is privacy, 10th Amendment, states' rights, 7th Amendment. Does anybody who's not in the law school at UK know what the 7th Amendment says? Yes, sir.
What the hell?
Okay. Does he work for you? Okay. It's for cases, for federal cases involving $20 or more, you have a right to a jury trial. Okay, there's been some inflation, so I asked Grok on the way here, what is $20 in 1781 or 89, whatever? What's it worth now? And it turns out it's almost the same number as the filing fee for a patent. So the Constitution guarantees you a right, in my opinion, to a jury trial. But the PTAB is not a jury trial. It's a tribunal of judges who aren't really, judges.
No other major country has this type of a tribunal that lasts for the life of the patent. It effectively, there is no quiet title. It effectively, as a result of this, it effectively keeps a cloud over the validity of the patent for its entire life, making all the investments in it along the way questionable. So when the owner of the property doesn't have quiet title, it makes it more difficult to attract the investment needed to put that building on the property that the congressman mentioned.
And there can be double jeopardy, right?
Exactly. That's
you
the
can be fed back into PTAB, where you have to roll the dice again in front of. It's like Russian roulette for patents.
It's also very inefficient because the same patent is usually in court being judged. So now you have two bodies looking at the same thing at the same time.
The irony is, it was sold in 2012. By the way, that's a year before I got to Congress. I'm now part of the problem, but this is not one of the problems I created because it was the year before I got there. But ironically, they were told that this will make it cheaper. Litigation is so expensive, and it's so hard for the small inventor to make it through all of these costs. So they came up with PTAB, but now it's like certain death. And then you have to go to the courts anyway.
Yeah, so it makes it just approximately $1 million more expensive to litigate your patent.
And by the way, I have a bill to repeal PTAB. So.
Okay, so I was going to ask. So, is there any legislative likelihood? It's really hard to predict if Congress is going to do anything, I think. But actually, it's easy to say that they're going to do nothing.
That's
if you
almost a certainty.
Yeah,
metaphysical certainty.
But on injunctions and the PTAB, just musing politically, do you think there is a likelihood here?
So my bill is aspirational. Like, it's the right answer, okay? But I'm pragmatic as an inventor as well. Sometimes you have to compromise. So I've co-sponsored another bill that's trying to make like PTAB optional. Like, you could decide whether to go there with your patent. And if it really is better for small inventors, well, the small inventors will choose PTAB over a federal court. But they won't, I mean. So that's one thing. I think even the people who passed PTAB, the people who were in Congress in 2012, they now acknowledge that there are major problems with it, and they want to mend it, not end it. And so if we could make it better, I will settle for making it better. I would like to get rid of it and just go back to what we had for over 200 years in this country, which is the courts.
Yeah, and the framers of the Constitution had a reason for creating an independent judicial system that's separate from the administration. There was a purpose behind it. It's a whole fundamental principle of our democracy to have an independent judiciary, and this is a violation of that in my view.
I have an idea that probably won't happen, but I ask this rhetorically in some of our hearings when we have people who are in favor of PTAB. I'm like, well, when my patent issues, like the day before it issues, can I just ask the patent director to run it through PTAB for me? Like, go ahead and give me the gold-plated patent that has already survived PTAB. If the same department PTAB, or the department PTAB works for the patent office, and so do the patent examiners, just walk it down the hallway and hand it to PTAB and say, check our homework. And then, if it survives, now you have this gold-plated patent that would have maybe more certainty.
Yeah, that is another potential approach. Some countries have effectively that system. Okay, I know we're basically out of time, but one final question, just at a higher level. The United States is in a huge competitive race for technological leadership with China. And unfortunately, it seems like already we have fallen behind in most areas of technology, and for the rest, we're about to fall behind. There's a recent study from a major international think tank that shows we're behind already in 57 out of 64 areas of new technology. and we're losing ground on the remaining few. This includes artificial intelligence, quantum computing, advanced materials, advanced energy sources, on and on. What should the United States do to get back into the leadership position, and how does the intellectual property play into this?
Well, in Congress, they're wringing their hands and trying to figure out how do we get more boys and girls interested in STEM programs? How can we promote that? And the problem is, you know, in sports you have like the Heisman Trophy or the Super Bowl ring. In theater you have the Emmys and the Grammys, and you know this. And for nerds, we had patents, right? Patents were supposed to be like, "Woo, I got a patent, Mom! Look at me!" Okay, and it used to, you know, your mom used to be proud of you for having a patent. But I tell my colleagues, and basically, you know, we need to convince congressmen to fix these problems. But I tell my colleagues, you realize when you weaken the patent system, you're taking away the ultimate reward for somebody who dedicates their education and their career to STEM. And so you're at odds with all of the things that you're trying to do, because we know in the future, if we want to compete with China and other countries, we have to have education. I mean, that's what University of Kentucky's about. We have to reward people who pursue this field. So it needs to be lucrative. You shouldn't have to give blood plasma if you want to be an engineer and invent and then compete with China. And it's also, you know, militarily. My graduate fellowship was funded by the military, because they knew that if we needed like another Manhattan type project, we would need those people in the schools, like at University of Kentucky, you know, in the PhD programs and the master's programs. And I wished more of my colleagues who are so eager to spend over $1 trillion on the military would do this one thing that's free that would make us more secure, which is to strengthen our patent system.
And I don't think it's difficult really to understand that that's the thing to do, because of all the areas of industry where the United States competes with China, the one area where we have a trade surplus, you know, China has a trade surplus in almost everything, right? Huge. That's why there's this tariff war being fought right now and so on. But the one area where we have a surplus, and it's not even close, is intellectual property. We export much more intellectual property, patents, copyrighted works, etc., than we import. When was the last time you watched a Chinese movie? Okay? They watch American movies there all the time, and it's the same thing with patented technology. We export much more than we import. If you weaken intellectual property rights, you're weakening the American premier export. And you're cheapening the premier American export. And I think Congress and your colleagues and the administration hopefully can understand it in those terms. So I'll give you the last words, Congressman, especially for Kentucky. What are the last words?
Well, as a resident of Kentucky and somebody who was a product of technology licensing from a university, I'm very excited about what Ian and your folks are doing here, which is you get the smartest minds in Kentucky here, and they are working on really hard problems, and their thesis shouldn't go on a shelf and collect dust. It can be used to enhance everybody's life, but in order to do that, you have to have an ecosystem where those students can start companies, where the venture capital will come to Kentucky instead of just going to Boston or going to California. Or New York, and so that's why I agreed to come here. I almost never leave my farm when I'm not in Washington, D.C., and I never leave my congressional district. Andy Barr's going to be very upset with me. I'm down here. I'm just kidding. We get along great. But this is such an important topic that when the former director of the Patent Office asked me to come, I came here for the state of Kentucky. And we need more people that understand how important this is to our state.
Congressman, thank you so much. Great to be with you. and thank you to the university.
Hey, so thank you all again. Such an insightful conversation and insights about intellectual property in our state. And I'll second too. I like the Eastern Kentucky real representation here. But last but not least, we have an incredible panel of experts in the innovation ecosystem. Excited to welcome back Ian McClure as our moderator. And then we will also have several folks from around our great Commonwealth. So we'll hand it over to Ian just to start our discussion on the role of IP in the future of the Commonwealth.
All right, if my other panelists can just come on up. We're going to do introductions as we get into the conversation. And I think we have enough seats up here. We have a big panel because we have a lot of important perspectives to get into this, and we're going to end up passing the mic around. All right. What a conversation. That was really neat. I want to, again, thank Andrea Iancu and the congressman for that. Really, really important words were said, and I think we should all reflect on that. And to be honest, if you want to go read the congressman's bill that he spoke about being aspirational, it is aspirational, but it is right, and it's where we should be as a U.S. in the patent system. So I do encourage you all to take a look at where we are and where we could be as a U.S. patent system. All right, now we're going to bring it home. Here we have representatives of some really cool perspectives that are across our Kentucky innovation economy. We've got economic development, we've got IP expertise, we've got manufacturing company expertise, venture capital, some really, really neat perspectives that are going to talk today. So I'm going to ask each of them to just introduce themselves when they first speak, and we're going to jump off with amusing. I mentioned this in my opening comments, so we're going to take just a couple minutes each to just talk about this reflection of if we were to delete all IP law, as was recently mused on some social media, which, maybe it didn't break the internet, but it did break my feed because I follow this stuff on LinkedIn and whatever. Just muse for a second. If we were to delete all IP law, what would that mean to our Kentucky economy? Terry, we're just going to go down the line. Terry, you go first.
I'm Terry Samuel. I have the honor to lead the Kentucky Science and Technology Corporation. We're a statewide nonprofit founded in 1987. And we work with a lot of startups, entrepreneurs, STEM education, a lot of the things. So I'm gonna actually follow on the fireside chat a little bit and say that the picture, the mental picture of the entrepreneur that mortgages his house, leaves a job, gives up insurance, may or may not have family that they have to worry about, run up their credit cards, happens a lot more than you might think. I hadn't thought of the plasma, but that's obviously one that's out there as well. You don't get paid for donating blood in Kentucky, but you do get paid for donating plasma. And if they don't have that protection to dump everything they are and 16 hours a day into a business and all of that, if they think that what they invent can easily get stolen, they're not going to do it. And that is what would happen if we didn't have it. And what does that mean for Kentucky? As Congressman Massey said, is we can compete. We can compete with Boston and Palo Alto and all those other places. And startups form a lot of businesses. Ian talked about that. Congressman Massey talked about that. But if they don't have that protection, they won't do it.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I've been so excited about this program, really excited to hear from you guys. Thanks for coming to Kentucky, getting off the farm, and talking with us. So I'm Mandy Decker. I am the chair of the Board of Advisors for KIPA, the Kentucky Intellectual Property Alliance. If you're in this room and you're not a member, join right now. Our amazing executive director, Caroline, will be sending you some newsletters, and you're going to be able to find out about some amazing opportunities. I also have the pleasure of being on the Board of Advisors with a couple of folks up here, Terry and Ian. So deleting all IP, had so many thoughts when I saw reports of those tweets, I guess we still call them, on my feed. So I guess a few were, first, I don't believe them. Second, it's very un-American. And third, that would be picking some short-term winners, and then all of us are losers in the long run. So what do I mean? Why do I not believe them? So I don't think they would be happy with anyone being able to release an app that is wrapped in X trademarks, right? That would be probably problematic. They don't want to delete that trademark IP. I don't think they're going to open their metaphorical file cabinets to let their competitors, software engineers, and maybe someone from the State Department of China come in and kind of pilfer through everything. So maybe trade secret law, we want to keep that. So maybe it's just patent and copyright law that we need to delete. Well, that is super un-American. As we've heard a few times today, we've got this thing called the Patent and Copyright Clause in Article 1 of the US Constitution. So before our founders were thinking about rights like free speech and due process, they were thinking we need to shore up these patent and copyright rights. So it's very much ingrained in our American culture. And why were they doing this? I mean, yes, it creates these wonderful incentives, but also part of creating a just society is allowing for protection for people's property. And I think that was really important to the founders of our country. It's not something that the king can just take away or give to some noble or do whatever. There's actual real protection, and that's part of our society being a just place. And then, of course, if you're getting rid of IP, who does that favor? Well, it favors a certain type of entity. It's going to favor a business model that does better when it can appropriate other people's discoveries, other people's content. It disfavors small businesses that don't have the deep pockets to really fight some of the established companies. And so, in the short term, if we did this, we are going to pick some short-term winners. And then so some of the losers are going to be these small companies. They're going to be early stage developers of IP like university. So what does that do? It dries up innovation moving forward. This is bad for all of us in the long run. And Kentucky, I think when you're talking about university and small business, that's very relevant in our state. So those are some of the things that I was thinking about.
Thanks, Mandy. Michael?
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Murray. I am a professor at the J. David Rosenberg College of Law here at the University of Kentucky. My specialty is, for my publications, is intellectual property and more recently artificial intelligence. And I'm the principal investigator of the Law and Artificial Intelligence Lab at the University of Kentucky. So I think Ian has brought me on to maybe fill in some spots where we'll be talking about artificial intelligence. But the question here is my other specialty, intellectual property. And Mandy's answer is really great, so thank you. You covered a lot of things. I can just I'm going to take a step, maybe a little up the scale. When you look at the word intellectual property, the second word is property, Mandy mentioned. The second word is property. And when the property in the law is the right to exclude. I think our two guests that spoke on that earlier, it's the right to exclude. And guess what? People don't like being excluded. And that's why intellectual property often, repeatedly, cyclically, comes under attack by people who don't like being excluded from something else that's good and valuable and desirable. So although we spend time and effort to produce inventions and cover them by cover them by patent law, we do expression and it's covered by copyright law, people like free things. And in certain areas, it's called freeloading off somebody else's intellectual work. And here it's exactly what we're talking about. If you eliminate intellectual property laws, you're basically opening the door to a freeloader society. And why would one want to devote all their time and effort and energy and money and investment in places that will not guarantee a rate of return because the next freeloader who happens to notice that there's something intellectually valuable and can be exploited could take it? So I don't believe, as Mandy said, I don't believe this was a serious comment. I don't believe it's a true comment, and I don't believe it's only directed. It's a flip remark that is to get a spike in the news cycle, and I hope that there is no true intention behind it.
And it gets panels like us to talk about it. Thanks, Michael. Rochelle?
Wow. Well, coming after all of these, first and foremost, what a privilege it is to be on this panel and to be with these esteemed guests. So I'm Rachel Smalls, Director of Invest Blue, one of the programs of UK Innovate. All UK Innovate team members, hello, hey, everybody, shout out. I run Invest Blue. It is a net new program that we've recently launched that's an angel investing program that focuses on connecting the global community of Kentucky affiliated innovators and investors. We do that by way of facilitating investments and deal opportunities through our angel syndicate, and then we also educate and train folks and try to be the easy button, if you will, getting folks started and activated as new angels in our ecosystem. So I feel like we've come at this challenge and question from a myriad of ways. I'm just going to ride the coattails of our previous panel here in terms of talking about just the competitiveness that will be at risk. And I can only think about that from a perspective as an investor in terms of where do you want the world's best talent to go to, right? And if you create an environment that disincentivizes the best talent in the world, they are always attracted to the places that protect their ideas and that gives them the guardrails to get to market and to ensure that their investment, their lifelong investment, will be sustainable. And so, for a world without IP law or IP protection means no more high caliber talent for our region, for our state, but also for us to be globally competitive. You can't afford to not have the I look at IP protection almost as if it's the scaffolding, right, of an infrastructure, right? You pull out the roots, then it really just crumbles a knowledge economy. It crumbles a ecosystem, a startup ecosystem. When you don't have the high caliber talent looking to your area as an opportunity for them to successfully build their companies, that means less spin outs from our IP office, that means less startups, which means less jobs, right? And the network effect continues. And so I just, I can't imagine that, if we just stick to first principles here of wanting to stay competitive, I think it's a no-go, essentially, for not having that. So I don't know, that's just my take.
Thanks, Rochelle.
Good afternoon. I also would like to thank Ian and all the program sponsors here that kind of brought us together. I think it's a really great topic so far. I'm going to take a slightly different take on the comments by Mr. Dorsey and Mr. Musk. I went back and looked at it, and admittedly, this was a kind of quick and dirty, but went to Google Patents and did a search to see how many patents Tesla holds and how many patents Twitter holds. Twitter just granted approximately 1,500. Tesla just granted approximately 3,000. So if we conservatively estimate the fees associated with those patents, just on Tesla, for example, and let's say I got the number wrong, so we'll cut it in half. So we do, let's say, about $50K to keep those patents in force over their lifetime, 1,500 patents. So Mr. Musk is very interested in efficiency these days. So he could save Tesla $75 million if he doesn't renew his patents. So I'm going to take a slightly different tact also on why IP matters. And it's a bit radical even within IP spheres. But there's been discussion about, is IP actually a fundamental human right? And on its face, it seems like a curious question, but when you start to think about it, is it really that radical? I mean, if we're talking about giving you a protection, like these are ideas emerging from different people's minds. And what could be more fundamental as a human than to have that protected as a property right? So I think deleting IP would be bad for that reason alone. So.
Thanks. And Jeffrey, you didn't introduce yourself. Just a quick intro.
Oh, I didn't? Oh, apologies. So, sorry, I'm Jeffrey Langer. I'm general counsel at Zoller Company. We are a clean and dirty water pump company headquartered in Louisville, Kentucky. Prior to being general counsel, I was fortunate enough to have a career as a patent attorney I did a lot of work bridging kind of patent and IP issues with business issues, and began my career at a firm called Finnegan Henderson in DC.
Great.
So.
Thanks, Jeffrey. All right. So let's dive into a few topics that are directly relevant to our economy here in Kentucky. So we heard from Director Iancu and Congressman Massey about some of the aspects of how patents are enforced or a challenge to enforce. I have some personal experience with some of that. Before UK, prior career stop, I worked on behalf of tech companies to enforce their IP in many ways, licensing, even selling, trying to put together patent pools, things like that. And I had direct experience with companies saying, we know we infringe, but you're going to have to sue us to do anything about that. And I have had companies tell me to my face, we might just throw these into the PTAB, actually, just to see how much you're willing to spend to put your money where your mouth is. So I know the challenges of that. But most of that work was in the high-tech wireless semiconductor spaces. We're here in Kentucky, a state much about manufacturing. And Terry, I'm going to pass this first question to you. You and I both have just recently led initiatives for the state to build new manufacturing innovation programs in additive and circular manufacturing. So as we think about Kentucky being a made-here state, we are no doubt a manufacturing hub for the U.S. and a supply chain hub. But we talk a lot about also then making Kentucky a create-here state, right? And this goes to Congressman Massey's great comments about the importance of STEM and engineering and incentivizing that activity. So maybe talk just about the role that IP needs to play for us to transition to this create-here mecca for manufacturing innovation here in Kentucky.
So first, let me talk manufacturing for a minute. Advanced manufacturing is really, really important to Kentucky. It's really, really important to the United States. We know that a lot of basic manufacturing has moved offshore. It's been in the news a lot lately. I'm going to reflect back about 15 years. I had the opportunity to go to a PC manufacturing facility south of here in Tennessee, run by a large American PC company, monosyllabic, first name Michael, you can fill in the last name. The really interesting thing, they were making Wintel PCs, pretty much a commodity. And you walked into the front lobby, the conference room that they had at this facility, and they had their process patents, big posters up on the wall. And they took pride in making pretty much commodity PCs, but they had process patents. We had to sign an NDA to even tour the place. And so that's basic manufacturing. That's not advanced manufacturing. And if we're going to be an advanced manufacturing state, we're going to be an advanced manufacturing country, we have to protect those, whether those be trade secrets or process patents or whatever they are. And I truly believe that as we become an advanced manufacturing state, what's going to happen is we're going to do more and more of the create side of that. As an old manufacturing guy, excuse me, ECs, engineering changes, happen all the time. And if you have to go back to the research headquarters in another state or another country and get those things, those create side fixed and running ECs, and the more that a headquarters R&D operation sees the create happening on the manufacturing line, I believe that where you have development, R&D, and manufacturing tightly coupled, not just intellectually, but also physically, that you have a great competitive advantage. And when that happens, the R&D headquarters, wherever it may be, is going to move more and more of the create side to the manufacturing side. So I'll kind of conclude 2 points. Advanced manufacturing is advanced. It has to be protected, somehow through our intellectual property system. Not necessarily patents, but it may be patents. Number 2 is, as we move from advanced manufacturing and doing those designs coupled with advanced manufacturing, is how I believe we can accelerate our move to be a create state.
Awesome. Good comments. I'm going to extrapolate this conversation, Jeffrey, and pass you a question, because So as we think about one thing that I know that UK Innovate often keeps as a North Star is increasing industry R&D in the state. Now, I mentioned going from made here to create here. That has to do with increasing the amount of R&D that can happen here. Yet we are 44th in the country right now in industry R&D. So Jeffrey, as general counsel of a product company here that's based on technology, what are those innovation policies that we need to think about that incentivize that kind of work here? We're already a state that's competitive for manufacturing, but how do we get competitive for R&D?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a topic we could probably spend the next 8 hours on. But just to do a real simple answer, I mean, it comes down to the dollars. State tax incentives that are immediate, congressional tax incentives that are immediate for R&D, state grants, particularly linking intellectual property production into innovation. So not just the IP itself, otherwise you can get a perverse effect where people are filing patents just to get that incentive. But if you can link it to the innovation itself and see development, I think those three pillars you cannot go wrong with.
Yeah, all good ones. And I know that we talk often about things that might incentivize. So, you know, at a time where federally funded research is at risk or a challenge, we'll say, compared with before, we're thinking about how do we do more research with industry? So policies that might incentivize industry to do R&D work with our university. Mandy, let me toss this to you because so as we think about university R&D being a big part of the R&D ecosystem here in Kentucky, we do between University of Kentucky and University of Louisville around $700 million in R&D research expenditures last year. You know, people often talk. You know, there's a contingency out there that fights for open science, right? And I think Andre actually talked about this. What would that look like if everything was open science? And would the startups and the small businesses that we're talking about exist? The impact from research relative, you know, in an open science ecosystem relative to one that leans heavily on intellectual property.
Yeah, that's such a great question and something that I think is really important for us to think about. One thing I didn't mention when I was introducing myself is I'm a patent attorney. I've been practicing for over 20 years in private practice with a firm called Stites and Harbison that has offices, several offices in Kentucky as well as some other states. And also, before I went to law school, I worked with a biotech startup company that in-licensed University of Kentucky intellectual property. So I will come at this question with that background that will inform my perspective. So what happens if we take developments from a university and we don't give them any intellectual property protection? Do we just have open science? What happens to those innovations? Well, typically what will happen is nothing. They will not make it to the public to benefit society. And why is that? Well, when you are thinking about a university invention, so I work in the life sciences space. When I was over at UK, I spent a lot of time in a tissue culture facility. And so what we do in the tissue culture facility is we grow these cells, so maybe growing some different cancer cell lines, and then we're developing some new small compounds, and we're testing them, and we see, aha, this one has a really interesting anti-cancer effect. So we're going to start doing some more research and looking at it. Maybe it's a class of small molecules that we come up with. Work with the tech transfer office to pursue patent protection for that class of compounds. So once that is complete, that process is complete, what still has to happen to move that class of molecules to a product that is effective, safe, scaled manufacturer in a way that can actually get out there and help people? So many people need to be involved. So many resources need to be invested. Many, many steps along the process. So there's this book that maybe some of you all have heard of. It's called Thanks 1,000. It's written by this guy named A.J. Jacobs. And so the premise of this book is he's looking at his morning cup of coffee and really wants to be mindful about everyone who is involved in the process of getting that cup of coffee to him. So we're not just talking about the coffee bean farmer. We're talking about, for example, the barista, but also the engineer who developed the coffee grinder. And we're talking about the roaster and all these people that added value to that product along the way. And it can be a shocking number of people when you really sit down and start thinking about the supply chains and the development and the everything that has to happen to that raw product. Well, that's the same sort of thing that has to happen when you're talking about this basic university research. Yes, there's that great invention that that comes to be, but lots of things have to happen along the way to get it to a product. So what evidence do we have that this is actually the case? That it's not just inventor's going to invent and then somebody's going to say, "Aha, I'm going to take this and run with it, and the public will get it." Well, look at pre-Bayh-Dole and what we had going on there, and why did the members of Congress who were in favor of the Bayh-Dole Act, why did they even care about this? So the Bayh-Dole Act was legislation in 1980, and what did it do? It made it clear that research that was federally funded, whether it's 1 cent or $1 million, that it could still be the subject matter of a patent. You could still get a patent if federal funding was employed in the development of that piece of intellectual property. And so if you look at before Bayh-Dole and after Bayh-Dole, you see that actually more university research is getting out to the benefit of the public. And so I was listening to a speech given by the Deputy Director General of WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, and she just had this great soundbite that I want to read to you because I don't think I can say it any better. So she says, this is Lisa Jorgensen, "If I think of all my discussions with global stakeholders, the most cited piece of legislation is Bayh-Dole and how they might attempt something similar in their own countries. Generating innovation is one thing, deploying it successfully is another." I think this is really important now for us to think about, because you may have heard some discussion about these so-called march-in rights in connection with Bayh-Dole, and particularly in the context of drug pricing. And I think that we need to be very, very careful in this context, because there are a lot of problems with, I think, moving down that path. One, Bayh-Dole march-in rights were in no way intended to allow for price fixing. They were intended to make sure that patented technology couldn't be put on the shelf and never pursued. They wanted to make sure this stuff was getting out to benefit the public. But also, if you think about price fixing and what it does in a market, it would have some very negative downstream effects. So those are some of my thoughts.
So I happen to know the actual numbers. Pre-Bayh-Dole, 0 drugs from federally funded research to market. Since Bayh-Dole, 252. So yeah, there's your data. Okay, so let's assume in a world where we've got all of this university research, and all of we've heard it from you, we've heard it from Director Yanku about how much investment it requires to get a drug to market, right? So Rochelle, the angel community will pay for that, won't they? Especially if we have no patents.
Well, our group is amped and ready, right? I mean, we've got some ample and eager new members that's looking to get the next and best talented entrepreneurs and innovators. Yeah, I definitely love, first and foremost, Mandy, the framework that you gave in terms of just kind of the downstream effects of what happens in the sense of thinking about why IP is so important and how it affects so many different kind of just players involved in the entire life cycle of the company. And of course, as you know, capital is just as important in that conversation. And I would say from the perspective of going back to this notion of competitiveness and, for our region, so I didn't say earlier, but part of my background a little bit too as well too, before joining the team here at UK Innovate, worked for a number of organizations. One was a venture capital firm out of Cincinnati that had about $50 million under management, supporting early stage companies in the Midwest and Southeast. And then I worked for another nonprofit organization, called Endeavor, that was a global nonprofit, supported growth stage companies from the Series B stage and beyond, and they were all located in overlooked geographies around the world. So we had about 40 offices around the globe, and I happened to work at our little small location in Louisville, but we covered the Midwest and the Southeast. And I bring that context and that line of thinking and conversation because I feel that when it comes to giving signal to capital, both of those organizations that I was working at used number of patents or the rate of patents as an indicator of a burgeoning ecosystem. When you looked across emerging markets around the world, our organization even had a research division called Endeavor Insight that looked at the rate in which patents or utility patents were coming out of a specific ecosystem, and used that as a potential signal and indicator to expand to that new market, to bring new ecosystem resources, to bring capital, to bring institutional capital, to bring, right? Like, it's one of those really mission critical signals that capital looks for when they're looking to find the next greatest and best founder to back. And particularly when you're talking about ecosystems like ours here in Kentucky, we're obviously, kind of from a geographic perspective, here in the Midwest, kind of Southeast, you can call it the gateway to the South, right? But I would say, we punch above our weight, right? In terms of the number of patents that come out. I think there was actually a article, I'm gonna have to pull this maybe for notes when we send a thing out to everyone, but there was this article that came out last year that rated our particular corridor, this Lexington to Louisville kind of MSA region, as one of the top 5 regions of net new utility patents. And there was in an article in, I think it was Axos. From then, you saw a number of incredible early stage VCs, angel networks, and other kind of regions wanting to come down to see what's the knowledge economy like here? What's some of the great innovations that are coming out of this region? And so, for us, I definitely think that that's something that we should brag more about. We should be more bullish about. We should be more proud about, because it truly is an indicator to bring more capital allocation to this region. And I think it's like a hidden gem that we like to keep to ourselves, but we should stick our chest out more about that. But I also brought that context as well, just to say, not only is this a signal for capital and for more capital allocators to pay attention to our region, but I feel that if we don't take advantage of the momentum that we have right now, we'll start to see a little bit of the brain drain that we often see in ecosystems like ours. So if you take a look across various different kind of city markets, like the Bentonvilles or the Kansas Cities, the heartland regions of the United States, right? All of us, obviously, Silicon Valley, Austin, Boston usually gets the lion's share of capital to this day, but there's a ton of emerging ecosystems that are looking to try to be the next best up. And if we take the opportunity to recognize how much we have great momentum already right here under our feet with our universities that are here, I feel that we may miss the momentum, and we'll start to see that brain drain happen, where we lose out on really high caliber talent, phenomenal companies and teams that will, that can spin up and create kind of startups out of our ecosystem. We definitely need to make sure that we surround them with the resources, the support, the guardrails that IP kind of provides, and kind of, again, just create that champion that needs to happen for those companies. So I don't know, I just was riding off of what you were saying in terms of that, the ecosystem dynamic and what's at stake. And definitely capital pays attention when you have a really robust knowledge economy, when you have a highly number of patents. We're talking about 700 million you just dropped, right? Like that's a signal. not just early stage folks like us. We kind of focus at Invest Blue on the pre-seed and seed stage, and we're an investment syndicate, meaning we're kind of member-led, and our LPs is one who makes the decisions for investment. And we focus specifically as well from a criteria perspective on companies that have a Kentucky affiliation or a Kentucky tie. There's a reason why we did that. It's because we thought that Invest Blue could be a great mechanism to boomerang back a lot of the talent that's drained to other areas. The awesome university talent that goes to the coast to try to, make it big in Silicon Valley, and is born and raised here, or went to school here, or has a farm here, right? But never having a mechanism or a way of giving back, never having a landing pad, if you will, some type of program that reaches back out and says, hey, can you bring your expertise back home to some of the founders that are building now? Hey, would you want to invest in the incredible, phenomenal research that's coming out of the university and get first dibs, first insights, first looks? Hey, could you mentor? Could you join the board? Can you bring that experiential execution talent that our innovators need? And so we fashioned Invest Blue to be a tool in the toolbox for our state to do that, to bring back the talent to our ecosystem, and to also highlight there's $700 million coming out of our state. Did you know that? Hey, we were rated number 3 out of 5 here in the region about utility patents. That means there's off-the-shelf opportunities. If you're looking for your next bet in Silicon Valley, or looking for your next opportunity to innovate, boy, we got a cadre of opportunities right here in our university. And so all to say, just more championing is what I'm trying to get at. We need to be more of champions about what we already have, the incredible gems that we have, and to know that we're heading in the right direction because capital is already paying attention to the signals that we're giving out.
I'm going to add one quick thing on Ian's question about Angel, and as the fireside chat mentioned venture. It's also, patents are really important on the flip side. When you go to sell a business. Acquisition is the most likely exit for a lot of startup companies. And when someone comes in to acquire, whether that be a big pharma company buying someone small or a big tech firm they're buying IP. They're buying what you already have protected. And so not only is it important to angel and venture on the front end, it's also critically important on the back end.
Yep. That's right. All right, so as we look at future forward, right? Everyone is thinking about AI and the implications that AI will have on the ability to protect things with IP law. So, Michael, if you could comment just where are we in the law as it catches up to AI, right? Where University of Kentucky, just like many other people across our state, are thinking about organizationally, how are we governing this? How are we investing in this, encouraging it? So as we get into that sandbox, where is the law right now? And are we heading into a space where IP law can be just as significant or impactful, or is it going to have to change?
I'm tempted to answer the second half of the question first, but I will start with, this is what some people would describe as a blessing and what others would describe as a curse. We are living through interesting times. And some people think that's a blessing, and many others think that it's a curse. But artificial intelligence is an interesting time. And it's a very difficult time for government at all levels and regulatory bodies at all levels, because there is so much in the balance of getting laws and regulations right, and it's very difficult to see the exact benefits and then recognize the exact downsides of a certain move. So when you ask the question of, is the law keeping up with AI? I actually think the law is prudently not racing in the United States to regulate AI, because we have seen an experiment carried out across the pond where they rushed to regulate artificial intelligence and in practical terms have basically quashed their AI innovation and industry. And they will take, I'm sure, decades if they ever recover from it. There's one substantial artificial intelligence company in Europe called Mistral, and there is nothing really other than that to say for Europe. And that's because the European Union has passed stringent, detailed, anticipating problems that have not been arised yet, but they can anticipate them, so they wrote a law to prevent them. Now, the United States could be criticized for saying that we tend to take a reactive posture, But in another way of saying it is we don't rush out to quash something before it actually becomes a known, experienced risk. And what I can tell you from studying AI for at least the last 2.5 years when it became household, front page news, is that AI is a growing, a morphing creature. It is not the same as it was a year ago. It is not the same as it was 6 months ago. AI is constantly moving and developing. So how do you write a law that anticipates what the AI is going to look like, and then make sure that it's going to be a prudent law that will not quash innovation and development? And that is the difficult thing. So that's what I'll say. What was the second half of your question? Now I talked right through it.
Is IP law catching up, or are we where we need to be?
With intellectual property law, I'm actually writing, arguing, trying to argue that we should eliminate this question about IP ownership and whether it's copyrightable work that comes out of generative AI systems, because generative AI systems, for the time being, are not sentient creatures. They are not individuals. They're not human beings, even though we love to anthropomorphize them because it helps us to express the things that we can't really understand other than by anthropomorphizing it. It's a creature, a being, isn't it? But it is not. It is not a human. It does not invent. It does not write poems. It doesn't write. It's not a human being that's issuing content. So therefore, the only proper author and the only proper owner of intellectual property coming that's connected to a generative AI system is the human being who is running the generative AI system, putting it into work, employing the generative AI system. I'm also writing and arguing that the question about copyright and the infringement potential of the works that are used to train artificial intelligence, we have law, and I know it's not a popular position, but we have law that's well developed for many years, 40 years in some cases, that says that you can use this raw material to gather from it the data in order to allow you to produce something else, which is this technological thing. It takes a longer time than I'll have to speak about how that comes out. And the second thing is, intellectual property, in say copyright, it doesn't protect every aspect of a creator's expression. It doesn't respect genre. It doesn't protect things like the general ideas behind works. It only protects one thing, the copying of the exact expression of the work. And these systems do not copy the exact expression of the works. And that, therefore, that is it. So does IP have to change? I say no. Our copyright law is ready for it. Trademark law is ready for it. IP doesn't put an enormous stress on trademark law. Strangely enough, it may be patent law that actually is an area where IP law has to change, because the non-obviousness standard is pretty challenged by the current AI that is able to see inventions that we can't see as human beings. I mean, it's able to analyze the data that's out there in the world and the data that's made available to the IP system, and it's able to see innovations that human beings have not been able to see yet. It may be that it supercharges what is obvious, and that therefore puts a real monkey wrench in our current system that balances novelty and obviousness versus non-obviousness and invention. And so that may be the area that we'll have to take a hard look at.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Okay, we could go on for a long time, but luckily we've got a bar and some drinks and a reception to get to. So we're the only things that keeping you from that. So I'm going to ask one last question, which is if you can describe in one or just a couple of words the impact of IP on the Kentucky economy. So you think about one or just a few words, if you can very succinctly describe the impact of IP on the Kentucky economy. Terry, you get to go first. Oh, yeah.
Let them go first.
Okay, fine. Jeffrey, you get to go first.
Foundational.
I like it.
Global competitiveness. I've been at it all day talking about it. That's what I stand by.
Competition, like it.
It protects what is really great about things that Kentuckians do.
I like it.
It's critical. And I just want to say one more thing before I hand over the mic.
Sure.
Okay, so
Just for you.
IP literacy is so important, folks. We have a nationwide problem. And so I want to challenge all of you who already know that IP is important because you're here today to make it a point to learn the basics well enough that you can teach it to someone else. Join KIPA as soon as you leave if you're not already a member, because there's some great resources. Follow UK Innovate because you're going to hear about some great programs. Follow C4IP because you're going to be able to learn some very interesting things from them. Thank you for letting me add on those words.
No, great last comments.
I'd say enabling and accelerating.
I like all of that. Okay, if you guys could join me in giving our panel a round of applause. And here's, I was gonna do some Q&A, but here's what I'm gonna suggest. Find us at the reception. Let's do Q&A in the form of just network and discussion. We have some amazing expertise here in the room, also some very curious people that do innovation, research, entrepreneurship. So let's do the Q&A via discussion, if that's all right, so we can get to the reception. And I want to thank, again, Jackie and Rohan back in the back for all of their work, Caroline for your work to help us put on this event. C4IP, thank you again for being here. Congressman Massey, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. And enjoy some networking and reception time. Thanks for being here.